Hey guys, tonight we're exploring the people who go quiet when they're hurting together. As we begin with a pattern that almost everyone has either lived or loved, the one where something painful happens, and instead of saying so, a person simply disappears into themselves, gets quieter, pulls back, becomes harder to reach, right at the moment when they most need to be reached. Right now, as you're watching this, someone else is watching it too. A different country, a different time zone, a different life, but the same quiet hour. Tonight we're exploring the psychology of people who go quiet when they're hurt together. If this is your first video here, take a look around, subscribe if it feels like home, and leave a comment, your location, your time. That small act of saying, "I'm here," does something. It reminds all of us that we're not as alone in this as the dark sometimes makes us feel. Dim the lights. Maybe pull a blanket over yourself if there's one nearby. Let's begin. You've seen this before. Something happens. A harsh word, a disappointment. A moment where someone expected care and found indifference instead. And the person on the receiving end doesn't cry, doesn't argue, doesn't ask for comfort or explanation or repair. They just go quiet. They answer in shorter sentences. They become polite in the way that feels more distant than rudeness ever could. They say, "I'm fine," in a tone that means the exact opposite. And when you push a little, they say it again, flatter this time, like a door being gently but firmly closed. If you love someone like this, you know how disorienting it is. The silence feels like punishment, even when it isn't meant that way. It feels like a withdrawal of something you didn't know you needed until it was gone. And if you are someone like this, if you recognize yourself as the one who goes quiet, who retreats inward when something hurts you, probably already know that it isn't a choice, exactly, not a deliberate strategy. It's more like a reflex, the most automatic, deeply wired response your nervous system knows how to make when the world becomes too much. Tonight, I want to explore where that reflex came from, why some people learn to go quiet when they're hurting, what it costs them and the people around them, and what, very slowly, can begin to change. Silence as a survival strategy. In psychology, the pattern of withdrawing emotionally when hurt is often connected to what researchers call a deactivating strategy. Deactivation, in attachment terms, means turning down the volume on emotional needs. Not feeling them less. The feelings are fully present, but suppressing the outward expression of them. Disconnecting the internal experience from the external signal. It sounds clinical. The reality is much more human. Imagine a child who is upset, genuinely, deeply upset, and reaches toward a caregiver for comfort, and the caregiver, for whatever reason, isn't available. Maybe they're overwhelmed. Maybe they're dealing with their own pain. Maybe they respond with irritation or dismissiveness, or a well-meaning but entirely unhelpful, "You'll be fine." The child learns something in that moment, a quiet, wordless lesson that will shape the rest of their emotional life. They learn that expressing the need doesn't get the need met, that reaching out leads not to comfort, but to further disappointment, or worse, to the added pain of feeling like a burden. And so, with the extraordinary adaptability that children have, they find another way. They learn to need less, or more precisely, to need just as much, but to show it less. To keep the hurt inside, where it can't be rejected, can't be dismissed, can't be used as evidence that they're too much to handle. This is not weakness. This is a child doing the most intelligent thing available to them in a situation they had no power to change. The problem is that the strategy doesn't expire when childhood ends. The nervous system that learned, "Don't show when you're hurt," keeps applying that rule in adulthood, in relationships that are nothing like the original one, with people who would respond entirely differently if only they knew what was happening. What going quiet is actually protecting. Here's something that often gets missed when people talk about emotional withdrawal. The silence is not indifference. In fact, it's almost the opposite. People who go quiet when they're hurt are, in many cases, people who feel things very deeply. The withdrawal isn't because they care too little. It's because they care so much that the hurt is genuinely difficult to manage, and silence feels like the only way to contain it without it spilling out in ways they can't control. There's also something else being protected, something more specific: vulnerability. To tell someone you're hurt, to say clearly and directly, "What you did affected me," is to hand them information about what matters to you, about where you can be reached, about what has the power to wound you. For someone who learned early that vulnerability leads to disappointment, that handing over that information is dangerous because it can be dismissed or used carelessly or simply not responded to in the way you needed, silence becomes a form of self-preservation. If I don't tell you that you hurt me, you can't hurt me again in the same way. If I don't let you see where the wound is, you can't accidentally press on it. The logic is airtight. The cost is enormous, because the wound doesn't heal in silence. It just heals alone, slower, in the dark, if it heals at all. For the ones who love someone who goes quiet, if you're the person who loves someone who withdraws, who has stood on the other side of that silence, feeling shut out, unsure what you did, unsure how to reach them, I want to speak to you for a moment. The silence is not about you, even when it's directed at you. That's hard to feel when someone you care about has become suddenly, completely unreachable. When the warmth has drained from their voice and you can't find the door back in. When you apologize and they say it's fine, and everything about the way they say it tells you it isn't fine at all. It's easy, in that moment, to feel punished. To feel like the silence is a weapon being used against you. And sometimes it's important to be honest here. Withdrawal can become that, if it goes on long enough without any path toward resolution. Silence used indefinitely, consciously, to make someone suffer for something they did, is a different thing from the involuntary retreat we're exploring tonight. But most of the time, the person who has gone quiet isn't trying to punish you. They're trying to survive the feeling without doing something they can't take back, without saying the thing that comes out of real pain and does permanent damage, without crying in a way that feels unsafe, without asking for something they genuinely don't know how to ask for. The most useful thing you can do, often, is not push. Not demand an explanation right now, in this moment, when the door is closed. But to make it clear quietly, without pressure, that you're there, that the door doesn't have to stay closed, that whatever is on the other side of it will still be okay. Sometimes that's enough. Sometimes just knowing the option is there that someone is waiting without an agenda, without a time limit, without the expectation that the feelings will be presentable or proportionate or easily explained, is what finally makes the silence feel safe enough to break. There's a long tradition in philosophy and literature of recognizing silence as its own form of language. Not absence of communication, but a different kind of it. The Stoics wrote at length about the discipline of not reacting, about the gap between stimulus and response, and what a person does with that gap. Marcus Aurelius, in his private writings, returned again and again to the idea of turning inward, not to hide from difficulty, but to process it before responding. The Stoics valued the ability to feel something fully and still choose, deliberately, when and how to express it. This is related to, but not quite the same as, what we're exploring tonight. The Stoic internal retreat was a conscious practice, a chosen discipline. The withdrawal we're talking about in this video is mostly involuntary, a reflex shaped by early experience, rather than a philosophy chosen in adulthood. But they share something important: the recognition that not everything that is felt needs to be immediately expressed, that the internal world of a person is real and valid even when it isn't visible, that there is dignity in processing pain privately. Where the Stoics were careful, though, was on the question of isolation. Seneca, writing to a young friend about solitude, distinguished between withdrawal that builds, that gives a person space to think and feel and arrive at something true, and withdrawal that simply avoids. Retreat, he suggested, was valuable as a temporary measure, a space to find solid ground before returning to the world. But as a permanent state, as a way of living entirely inside your own walls, that was something else. That was not wisdom, that was hiding. And hiding, however understandable its origins, has a way of becoming its own prison over time. The short-term logic of going quiet is, as we've established, sound. It protects. It contains. It prevents the kind of raw, unguarded expression that has felt unsafe in the past. But over time, the cost compounds. Relationships, deprived of honest emotional exchange, tend to thin out. Not in a dramatic, explosive way that would at least be clear. They thin in the way a fabric does when it's been stretched too long in one direction. It's still there, still functional, but something essential has been worn away. The person who never says they're hurt tends to accumulate hurts, each one small enough to dismiss in the moment, but collectively building into a weight that becomes harder and harder to carry without showing it. Until one day, often over something apparently small, a minor thing that shouldn't matter this much, the silence breaks. And what comes out is not about today's small thing at all. It's about all the things that were never said, arriving together, with nowhere near enough context for the other person to understand where any of it is coming from. This is the moment that looks, from the outside, like overreaction, like irrationality, like someone being unreasonably upset about something small. And the person in the middle of it often knows it looks that way, which adds shame to the pain, which makes everything harder. There's also a deeper, quieter cost. The person who has spent years keeping their hurt inside gradually loses access to the parts of themselves that were hurt. The feelings don't disappear. they compress. And compressed feelings have a way of expressing themselves sideways, in exhaustion and cynicism, and a low-grade numbness that spreads slowly. Until one day, a person realizes they don't feel much of anything particularly acutely, and they're not entirely sure when that happened. Change, for someone whose default response to pain is silence, is not a dramatic breakthrough. It doesn't happen in a single conversation, or through a decision made at a particular moment. It happens in small increments, often so small they're barely visible even to the person going through them. It starts, usually, with noticing. Noticing the moment the shutdown begins, not catching it in time to do something different that comes much later, but simply recognizing it as it happens. Observing. There it is. I've just gone quiet. Something just hurt, and I've closed a door. That noticing, without judgment, without the demand that it immediately change, is itself a small act of self-compassion. It's the beginning of a different relationship with the reflex, not as something to be ashamed of or urgently fixed, but as something to be gently understood. The next step, and it can take a long time to get here, is learning to name the feeling to yourself before you try to express it to anyone else. Not "I'm fine," and not the full, unedited version of everything that's happening inside you, but something true and manageable. Something like, "I'm hurt. I don't fully understand why yet. I need a little time." That sentence, or something like it in your own words, is not a weakness. It is one of the hardest and bravest things a person who has spent their life going quiet can learn to say. It doesn't solve everything. It doesn't guarantee that the other person will respond perfectly. But it opens a door that has been closed for a long time. And doors, once opened even slightly, are easier to open again. Wherever you find yourself in this story tonight, whether you're the one who goes quiet, who right now has something sitting inside you that you haven't found words for yet, or maybe aren't sure you ever will, or whether you're the one who loves someone like that, who has stood outside a closed door more times than you can count, wondering whether to knock again or give them space. I don't want to leave you with a task, just this. The silence makes sense. Whatever shaped it, however long it's been the default, it made sense once, and part of it still does. There is nothing wrong with needing time. There is nothing wrong with processing pain privately before you're ready to share it. You are allowed to be somewhere in between, not fully open, not fully closed, not ready to say everything, but maybe ready to say something small, something true. Something that doesn't have to carry the weight of everything that came before it. Just one quiet, honest sentence when you're ready. That's enough for now. I want to speak slowly now to whoever is still listening. If you are someone who goes quiet when you're hurting, you were never wrong to protect yourself. The silence that saved you, once, was the best tool you had at the time. You did what you needed to do to get through. And if carrying that silence has become heavy, if the door you built to protect yourself has started to feel like a wall you can't find your way out of, that doesn't mean you're broken. It means you've outgrown the strategy that once kept you safe. And outgrowing things, even things that served you, even things you built yourself with your own hands out of real necessity, outgrowing them is not failure. It is, quietly and exactly, what growth looks like. Tonight, you don't have to open any doors. You don't have to find the words you haven't found yet. You only have to let yourself rest in the knowledge that the hurt you've been carrying is real and seen and valid, even when it's been carried in silence, even when no one else knew it was there. Let your breathing slow. Let your shoulders drop. Let whatever you've been holding just for tonight, just for these few quiet hours, be a little lighter. You don't have to carry it all the way to morning. Just set it down, right here, beside the bed, and rest. If this reached you tonight, leave a comment. Just your city and the time. And if you want more nights like this one, subscribe. We're here every Monday, Thursday, and Sunday. Same quiet place, same honest voice. Good night, wherever you are.